So I want to talk about my book, William Everson, The Shaman's Call. William Everson was probably the greatest West Coast poet that America has produced. William Everson was a student of Robinson Jeffers, and Jeffers was his master. But in many ways, Everson was not just a follower of Jeffers. He actually saw himself as a mediator between Jeffers and Walt Whitman in the East Coast. And the Shaman's Call was given to me by an actual phone call I received from Bill. This was right after his announcement for his 80th birthday, which was in 1991. And I had sent Bill a paper, and he liked it so much, he enthusiastically called me up on the phone and said, you know, please come down and I want to collaborate with you on the writing of a book. So the Shaman's Call was a literal call I received over the phone from William Everson. On the other hand, there was the second call, which came from my mentor at the time, Donald Sandner, Jungian analyst and a shamanic drummer, who was publishing a book at the time, The Sacred Heritage, Analytical Psychology and Shamanism, which was his expertise. So Don Sandner was giving me questions to ask Everson about the subject of shamanism in American poetry. And that became the theme of the entire book. It was a ongoing conversation over a period of almost 2 years, between 1991 and 1993. And Everson had Parkinson's disease, which made speaking very difficult for him. Now, the third call, of course, for me as a Jungian psychotherapist, I looked to my dream life, and it was actually Everson who had taught me to value and look at the vocational dream and what he called the vocational archetype. This was his hypothesis, that there's a vocational archetype in the human psyche. So I had dreams that were coming forth at the time that were confirming this call to go down and begin this collaborative book with Bill Everson, which was a marvelous experience. I had been William Everson's teaching assistant at the University of California at Santa Cruz as a young man at the age of 24, 25. And sitting in his course, Birth of a Poet, was really a religious experience, not just for myself, but for many students who took his course. There was 100 students in each quarter, and I was his teaching assistant. I had been asked by Bill to teach Jung's theories of dream interpretation to the dream group seminar, and I also held office hours. So I had an inside view into this phenomenon that we were looking for in the course, which was this evocation of the archetype, as he said, of vocation. Now, Bill could not write anymore at the time that I went down. So the call from Bill was really he wanted to write a final version of Birth of a Poet, and I had been his TA, so he wanted me to carry the second edition of Birth of a Poet for him, because, as I'm saying, he could no longer write. So the best means of communication for him was through the spoken word, and he was at the time suffering from Parkinson's, but nevertheless his mind was as sharp as an eagle in terms of his intuition. He was a brilliant man, and I loved him dearly, and I'm so grateful to him for his really taking me under his wing and Probably Bill Everson made the biggest impact on my development than anybody I can name. It was a profound experience, and I've had hundreds of dreams about Bill Everson. He's come to me many times through dreams, and I think that publishing this book in 2009 was a final tribute and a gift to Everson for everything that he had given me and so many people at Santa Cruz and in many parts of the United States. He was a prolific poet who gave electric readings on platform. Nobody could read a poem like William Everson. It was absolutely electric, and you felt something go through you by God. It was a powerful experience, and I'll never forget it. The main subject of the book then is the phenomenon of the call specifically to American poets. These are shaman poets, by which I mean a poet who enters ecstatic states of consciousness while in trance, while writing, and while speaking aloud, what Whitman calls vocalism. Throughout the book there's this interesting dynamic interplay between Whitman on the East Coast and Jeffers on the West Coast, and Everson seeing himself as the mediator between these two great American bards. West Coast literature is something Bill Everson covers in his book Archetype West, and we discuss that book in The Shaman's Call, as well as a number of his other works. And the subject matter is the depth exploration of the concept of the archetype of vocation and how that manifests itself in a student's dream life at the college entry level. And I've seen this in my clinical practice as a Jungian psychotherapist, that so often this career transition that happens in early adult life, right at the college entry level after high school, and then again at midlife, between the ages of 30 and 40, there's this readjustment that happens. And oftentimes vocational dreams will emerge. And we explore this subject in depth from a Jungian analytical standpoint. Bill Everson was one of the greatest Jungian poets. Really, he was marvelous at bringing Jungian concepts into American literature, such as, for example, his long epic poem, River Route, a Syzygy, which is just a marvelous contribution to Catholic poetry. I want to just end this with a reading of a poem that Bill Everson wrote. It's his second poem in the residual years, called October Tragedy. And this is a subject that we talk about in depth as well. This is a poem that came to him after he pulled a volume of Robinson Jeffers' poetry off the shelf at Fresno State University. And he literally dropped out of school at that point and began to write poetry. And here it is. It's, do not sing those old songs here tonight. Outside the buckeye lifts nude limbs against the moon. Outside the heavy-winged herons are scaling down into the misty reaches of the marsh. Bitter is the wind, and a mad dog howls among the withered elderberry on the ridge. Bitter is the quiet singing of the cricket, and the silent pools lie black beneath still reeds. Go away, follow the spoor of a wounded buck over the marsh and deep into the desolate hills. You must never sing those old songs here again.